Hi, folks. Welcome to the next episode of the Serverless Edge. My name is Dave Anderson. I'm a technical fellow at Bizarre Voice and author and contributor to Serverless Edge.
Michael O'Reilly, a software architect with Globalization Partners and contributor with the Serverless Edge.
Mark McCann, contributor and author at Serverless Edge, stay-at-home dad.
Good stuff. So we're continuing our series of talking about our favorite well-architected pillars. Which will be our favorite? Who knows? How exciting. Today we're going to talk about the performance pillar, which I think is a strangely interesting one. It's called performance efficiency. This one's got a couple of different bits. Like I say, each of the pillars of well architected, I usually have around 10 questions. This one has 8, and it's got 4 sections. For this one, it's selection, review, monitoring, and trade-offs. And this is really about the performance efficiency of your whole system. But the meaty part here is selection, where there's 5 questions about selection. And really, the kicker question here is the first one: how do you select the best performing architecture?
Ooh, that is a good one, because you just don't throw loads of technology to solve a problem if you don't actually understand who your users are and what are their needs. So this one is, you should go really hard and deep on this one to truly make sure that you understand the problem you're trying to solve for, the users that are going to use this system, what are their needs, and once you have that in hand, do something like domain-driven design, just to break it up a little bit. Make sure you have your good boundaries and good domains established. And when you have all that, you are well informed, and now you can think about what's the best architecture that can actually meet the needs of my users.
And this is an interesting. I've probably been in this position, I'd say 3 times in my career, when you're sitting and your job is to pick an architecture for a big problem, and it's like the responsible moment, because that architecture might last 10, 15, 20 years, and you have to be really careful about what that's for and what it's going to do and what it'll do in the future. I think the few times I had done it, it worked okay, but it's pressure, because there's always, at the start of a project, there's always pressure to just get something working, but you need to kind of pause at the start and figure that out. I think as well, the idea of the mental model of the system is really important. But can you explain to everyone in your company what it is? It's an X, Y, and Z. It's like the mental model of a car. Everyone knows that if you draw a car, there's engine, wheels, steering wheel, brakes, a cabin, whatever. People get the mental model of it. And your architecture, your system needs to be that simple. This is what it is. There's lots of different ways you can structure it, but you need to decide on a mental model that will work, people get, and then it's going to evolve over time.
I think the evolution is critical here. Is it the best architecture to meet the needs right now? But is there scope, capacity, room for it to evolve to meet unexpected future needs as well? You haven't painted yourself in the corner.
And I think within this one, certainly with my experience over the last number of years and kind of adopting the serverless first mentality, is you go out with. I think this is where the sort of opinionated kind of approach. The fact that the AWS or the GCP or Azure they've got these opinionated kind of managed services that you can kind of integrate and assemble. And if you guys have mentioned, like, Dave, I think you were kind of touching on sort of concept there on evolutionary architecture, that whole last responsible moment, where if I'm building something, you'd like to build it fast, get out there in front of it. Yeah. And then in the meantime, focus in on is the domains correct? Is the logic in the right place? Is it, am I thinking about this in terms of the socio-technical view of the organization? But meanwhile, I don't want to kind of overthink something or over-design something. Yeah. So I want to move fast, but then I reserve the right at some point as we scale it up, or the system kind of evolves, to pivot and change reasonably quickly, which I think is, again, another factor here with with serverless, because it is event driven. You are forced to go down sort of really event driven style architectures.
Yeah.
It lends itself to that sort of evolution. So you can swap things out later, and you can, if you need a container or a SaaS or an external vendor or whatever, it's very pluggable, it's very evolvable.
Yeah.
So it is,
Yeah, I think there's something important about that as well. Remember, performance efficiency is that when you break your system down to domains and down to components, I remember used to say this, is say the engineer, see that component, it's got to do X, Y, and Z, and it's got to be good. It's got to work. It's got to be well architected. So you figure out how to make that happen. And if that's just calling a managed service from AWS, fine. That's building something, fine. But there's a whole bunch of non-functional requirements about that box that need to be right. Which is thinking about the component itself, where you get into the idea of, is it a commodity component, or is it something that's mission critical to your business, or sort of like an IP thing? So do you need to build it, or can you just rent it? And that, again, with the whole aspect of worldly mapping, you want to be thinking about, should I build this? We need global storage. Let's try and build that. No, just use S3.
Yeah, and I think, like you mentioned, that having that serverless first mindset and approach really can help you with performance. Is there a managed service you can leverage? Does it have a serverless capability, or is it on the serverless spectrum? And if it doesn't, can you fall back to something that's still have serverless characteristics, maybe not as much. So example here would be, does DynamoDB fit your needs for your data? If it doesn't, can you fall back to something that's still on the serverless spectrum, like Aurora Serverless, if it's a relational database, for example, right? So I think you're keeping that in mind. What's the managed service I can leverage first? What's the serverless capability I can leverage first? And if it doesn't meet your need for your use case, then you can fall back to something that's a bit further back on the serverless spectrum. But that applies across compute, storage, your database, and to a degree your networking.
Well, here's the serverless sort of standing still and you're improving type mentality kind of kicks in here as well, because over the number of years we've seen cold starts reduce. You're starting to see sort of more connectivity directly across managed services, as opposed to having to go directly through lambdas, and you're starting to get those sorts of benefits without you even having to do anything. So again, it's another benefit to really considering a serverless approach to your architecture. And I know even then it allows you to focus on, like Dave, if you're kind of working on a sensitive part, or this has to be performant, we got to get it working. There's ways to design that into the workload itself. So like, do we need the cache, or do we need, is there stuff there that we could do to optimize or streamline, or and certainly those conversations would happen here as part of this review.
I think one of the best things about the serverless approach to performance is that the cloud provider is constantly working at improving performance efficiency, reducing costs, speeding up, and adding more horsepower to your compute. So by choosing smartly your architecture, you got a free underlying platform team that are constantly working at improving your performance, and you can just take advantage of it, sometimes without even having to worry about it. Sometimes with a small change you can leverage that performance improvement.
Yeah, and then moving on to the next section that related to what you just said is that review, and here that's about how do you constantly review your architecture? Do you take advantage of new releases? I mean, the cloud providers are constantly innovating. They're releasing stuff every week. You want to be in a position where you can add in new stuff quickly, that you're not breaking the whole architecture, or kind of like a two-way door, as Amazon call it. You want to be able to go in, do something, and then get back out again if you need to. Don't do a one-way door where you're kind of trapped.
Yeah, and I think this is where worldly mapping can be, really advantageous to your teams. If you've mapped out your tech stack and you understand the components of your tech stack, and you can see where they are in the evolutionary axis, and a new capability or a new service comes out, you can immediately start to assess it against your current components and say, well, we're custom building a database. Oh, there's now a new managed service that meets our needs exactly. Let's evolve and use that.
Yeah.
And as
well. So what we've done this in the past is sometimes you think we're building something, but something's going to come out that's going to do that job for me. So I'm going to build that in a way that I can replace it easily when something comes out.
Yeah, so
predict the evolution.
Yeah, totally.
EventBridge is a good example there, where maybe, for a long time we've been using like an SNS, SQS fan out type approach to the eventing. Whereas, EventBridge, when it was initially released, the latency there was maybe something you were kind of looking at. You're kind of going, well, it's getting to the point where, and you can see the team are trying to get that reduced, but it's, you're constantly looking at that kind of going, okay, well, maybe once that gets to a certain level, we'll make that cut over. But it's a good example of, how do you evolve it, and are you planning for that?
Yeah.
And there's probably another Serverless Craic episode just on how to keep up with the pace of change and the fire hose of informational updates. But
do you know how to do that? Do you know how? Do you know? Can you tell us?
No. I think we need to have an episode to explore. But I think there is huge return on investment of just having your radar up and being aware of how the environment around you is changing, and being open and able to adopt some of these new capabilities that can massively save you time, money, and effort.
Yeah, for sure. So then the next section of this one is monitoring, which is how to monitor your resources for performance, which is fairly straightforward. And then the last one is trade-offs. How to use trade-offs to improve performance. And a great example of that is the Lambda Power Tuner, where you can tune your function based on memory or CPU to get that nice balance between cost and performance.
Yeah, that's a great one. And I think that's it. It's like, what are you willing to pay for? Is it worth it? So performance efficiency quickly becomes a worth-based development type conversation. If your business isn't bringing in loads of money, you don't need all this horsepower under the hood. It doesn't need to be that efficient or that effective from a performance point of view if you're not bringing in the money.
And there's a sustainability thing there as well, like not to leap ahead, but like, do you need a sub-second response time for something? Maybe a 1 second response time will be okay, and not burning through everything just for the sake of it.
This is a good habits one, I think. So you get into the habit of, is our Lambda too big? What can we do to kind of thin it down? Can we shorten it? And anytime I run this, I normally do see quite a lift. I've seen teams go from 3 second response times to half a second response times because they've just trimmed something down. So it's definitely one. It's a good habit to be in.
There is a fear when you get all this in place that teams optimize, and the engineering time isn't worth the performance improvement. So you need to just keep mindful of that. But that's when you're pretty far down the maturity curve on this.
Not a bad problem to have. All right. So that's the crack. That's the performance efficiency pillar of well architected. Thanks for listening. More thoughts on the blog at theserverlessedge.com and on Twitter at serverlessedge, and also on Medium, Dev2, and LinkedIn. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.